Advanced TV Herstory, the podcast that brings you fresh perspective on the importance of TV in our lives. We tell stories of leadership, persistence, and achievement of TV women, because in the lives of women, no other media platform has influenced or inspired so many. Lo, these 60 years. Women of all ages have been impacted by what they've seen and will see on TV. So join us for a little advanced TV herstory by streaming it directly on our website, tvherstory.com, or anywhere you find podcasts. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.
Well, hello, TV Herstoryans. Welcome to another installment in this series of conversations I've been having with author and TV nerd, retro TV lover herself, Jeanine Furino, who has written a book called, well, Jeanine, I'm going to let you introduce the book, and then I will continue to introduce Advanced TV Herstory. Tell us about the book.
Oh, sure. It's called Retro TV Lover Presents All the Single Girls, and it's about just almost all of the single women that have been featured in television shows throughout the years from the 50s to today.
Wonderful. And so Jeanine and I are becoming old hand at this. If you've had a chance to listen to any of the other interviews we've done, we have sort of been in a very calculating way of walking through the themes that Jeanine chronicles in her book. And she goes into great length about the TV shows themselves, the series themselves, which featured strong lead women characters who were single, but then she has taken that single status and taken it a step further. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about what those 7 themes are. We did a total book recap, which is available as its own podcast episode. And in general, we have just really dug deep into TV series that go all the way back to the 50s. So chances are that as we take any of these themes, we will have skipped through, 60 plus years of TV shows. Everybody who listens to any of these episodes is going to pick up on a series or a show that they remember with great fondness. So that's been the fun that Jeanine and I have had. Jeanine and I met on Twitter, as most of my contacts do these days. And she is found on Twitter at
Retro TV Lover at Retro TV Nerd.
All right. So that's what we're going to do today. Today's theme is talking about the Feminerd, which is a phrase that Jeanine uses in her book. So we're going to ask her to sort of define what the Feminerd is. But first, just a little bit of background of you, Jeanine, and how it is that a huge TV fan such as yourself finds herself writing a book. And tell us about the format of the book as well.
Oh, sure. Well, I've worked in publishing for over 20 years, and after publishing so many other authors' books, decided to put my love of television to use and decided to publish my own book. So the subject of single women was of interest to me. Throughout the years, I've collected numerous DVDs of old television shows that I love, and decided to put a book together about the single woman.
And in putting it together, you chronicle it through the decades, correct?
I did. I wanted to show the progression of women throughout the years, the different types of careers that have been afforded to women from the 50s to today. So I thought it was important to do it chronologically.
While the singular topic, the theme that brings all of these series together is that there is a strong character who is single at some time in the series. You also do a great job of articulating the various professions that are built in, or whether or not they even work at all, and how important it is for women who see themselves on TV, or girls who see women on TV, to either ascribe them to a profession or not. And we kind of forget that. We sort of take that for granted. And so as you and I have talked about how they are positioning their personal lives with their professional lives, if they have one, it's always an interesting twist, and it usually contributes to that character's overall presentation.
Right. And I think it's important for young women today to see the older shows and see how life really was for women back in the 50s and 60s, and how few opportunities there were compared to today.
And so today we are talking about the Feminerd. But Jeanine, help us again with the other 6 themes then that you found as a pattern after you continued to build out this chronological history of TV series that you came up with a total of 7 themes, one of which is the Feminerd.
Right, well, first we had the woman whose goal is to marry or to find a long-term love, someone who will provide for her. And we mostly saw her in the 1950s and 1960s, followed by the caregiver, whose primary job is caring for others. And on television, we've usually seen her as a maid or a nanny, and her life would revolve around the people or the family that she cares for. Then we see more of the career woman, and that's the woman whose focus is mainly on her career ahead of love. And that also led to the working single mother, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. And we also see from time to time the retired woman who has had a career maybe, and now she's retired, but we don't see her that often, but probably most famously depicted in the Golden Girls, followed by the woman who isn't sure what she wants out of life, and leads us to the Feminerd, which we will talk about today. The woman who's great at her job, usually a bit socially awkward, pretty smart, and not quite sure how to maneuver through a romantic life.
Okay. Yes, those are the 7 themes. And, as I was reading the book, Jeanine, the first time, I started to realize just how much you have in this, in this bound edition, which is by no means perfect, by no means complete, because you're still finding shows that never even, that maybe only had 3 episodes, or that were on and just simply up until you start thinking about a category, all of a sudden you start to wonder whether or not it fits. So I continue to just, every time I go into the book, I am in awe of the amount of work that you did, how you gathered it all. And the other important thing that you will find, listeners, in this book, in Jeanine's book, All the Single Girls, which you won't find in nearly any other book that I've ever seen, is the schedule that was kept for the series by the network, and in cases which network it was on. And why that is so important is because very frequently not putting in any motivations or anything, but shows that featured women very frequently were moved around on the schedule quite a bit. They were never able to garner the traction. And at the end of one season or 2, you know what? They just never picked up.
Oh, yeah. You'll see that a lot, especially you start to see that in the 1970s with Alice. I mean, almost a half a page is taken up with how many time slots they moved them to.
And it could be said, and this is why I'm not going to actually make the statement, but it could be said that happens a lot in general with TV. But it even happened with very popular shows too. I can hear in the decision room that a popular show had to get moved to a different time in order to be the strongest show in the lineup, except that, very frequent in many cases, it then just led to a total drop off by the audience because they were so used to seeing it on, they had built their lives around Monday night at 8:00 or Monday night at 7:30. So anyway, so that's what you will find inside Jeanine's book, All the Single Girls. So we are going to talk today about the Feminerd, and you've defined all of your themes, and the Feminerd is definitely someone that so many of us can relate to. Help us understand, Jeanine, how it is that you came to see the Feminerd. When did it dawn on you that you finally had come upon 3 of them, and who those might have been? Well,
I noticed they're career women, but they're not the normal or the usual career woman you saw on television up to around the 1990s, when I started to see, Ally Mcbeal, I think might be the first one. She's a career woman, but she's so socially awkward and has put her career ahead of everything, so much so that she really doesn't know how to act when it comes to a romantic situation.
And so the nerdy aspect is, help me understand how you picked that word.
Well, she's super smart, and she is very quick-witted. Ally Mcbeal was, like I said, the first, but as you see her progress, you notice that she doesn't really dress very fashionably, as in, maybe Jessica Day and New Girl, or even, Liz Lemon in 30 Rock isn't the most fashionable, snappy dresser out there.
Mm-hmm. And so Ally Mcbeal being one, Liz Lemon, were any of the women in Sex and the City considered Feminerds?
I don't think so. If you wanted to pick one, the closest I think would have been Miranda. She was a slave to her job and really never thought about romance. And when she did have opportunities to have a real relationship with a man, she didn't know how to act in the situation.
Made more so because she, as an attorney, was making more in many cases than her romantic pairings found herself. I remember a number of episodes where they kind of got into why she was wearing what she was wearing to work, and that the others would, in fact, sort of criticize the fact that she had to dress so conservatively.
Absolutely, yeah. She was always in a pantsuit, as I recall. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So are there any outlier characters who you think of beyond the ones you've mentioned who maybe just people never really gave consideration to, or any early ones that, as you continue thinking about this Feminerd concept, was in fact around in the late 70s or the early 80s?
Oh, in the late 70s, early 80s. I didn't really see that many, but I did. You notice, like in more recent years, there was a really good show that was on for, I think, 2 seasons that I don't think was given a chance as it should have been. The Mysteries of Laura with Deborah Messing. And she was, I think, a total Feminerd. She dressed like a slob, she was almost like a female Columbo, if you will, in her dress and manner. And she ate like crazy, she had food all over her desk and just didn't know how to act in social situations either. I thought she was like a really rich character that they didn't give the show enough of a chance to fly.
So are there any, as you've, kind of cataloged women, and every once in a while we come upon a theme where there is room for evolution, there's room for a metamorphosis. And can you think of any series, and listeners, I invite you to go back in time, keep plugging along on the treadmill or whatever you're doing right now, but thinking through the time when perhaps the series started out with a Feminerd, and then she, through whatever means of change, evolved to something a little bit more sophisticated, to presenting herself more positively, either in her social situation or her professional setting.
Yeah.
Jeanine, did I end up probing enough on that question
I think
for
so,
you?
Yeah, I always like to look at Leslie Knope of Parks and Recreation. She started as a real small-time girl, kind of dressed a little frumpily, but she had this real inner drive to serve the public of her small town in Indiana. And over the years, she found herself running a regional office of the National Park Service. And then, she found a relationship and love and became a mom, and then became governor of Indiana. So, and found like a style for herself too. I think she really became something of a butterfly. She also liked to give back and mentored the young girl in her office, April, and kind of gave this girl who had no direction whatsoever and gave her encouragement and mentored her through the years to become something, to do something with her life.
Let's grab a little classic Leslie Knope from her practice date when she was getting ready to go out with Dave in the 2nd season.
Hey, Dave, it's me. It's Leslie.
Hi, Leslie. It's good to see you. You don't want to do that.
So Dave, let's begin our conversation.
What's on the note cards?
They're possible topics of conversation.
Whales, parades, electricity, and the rest are blank.
Yeah, well, I couldn't think of anything else. The Danish call it apparaat, which literally translated means the up and down machine.
Wow, that's a thorough history of the teeter-totter. You're 20 minutes late. I almost left.
Okay. God. Well, I was dropping my niece off.
What's your niece's name?
Torpel. That's not a name. I don't have a niece. My niece's name is Stephanie.
Sophistication-wise, I have to say that I find the character of Brenda Lee Johnson from The Closer to be somewhat similar, and I've done actually 2 podcast episodes about where I consider a break in that series, the first 4 seasons, which really was her that really showed her evolution. She starts out, and they started the show with her being a little on the frumpy and the conservative side, and then there's articles and there's interviews about how it is that they evolved her to take on a little bit more of a Southern feminine feel, but in that her sophistication developed as well.
Oh, you're right. I hadn't even thought of that, but you're absolutely right. And she's a great character, great strong female character.
Yes, and then to see her in season 5 with her, her full on, the pink suits and the handbag, she kind of hit this really nice fashion and hair sort of blend. Although and her personality and her demeanor had somewhat improved. She had really kind of figured out the political path within the LAPD. And then boom, here comes Sharon Rader, and Sharon having a little bit of a different carriage and stature and a totally different color palette to work off of. I thought that was just fascinating.
That is an excellent point. Yeah.
So, when we think about the Feminerds over the years and a viewer watching, was it that the Feminerd was just sort of endearing? Did we like Leslie Knope better when she was frumpy, or did we like her as she evolved?
Yeah,
Any thoughts on that?
We probably liked her a little bit more when she was a little frumpy, and because she's somebody to root for. And then once they become the flower, there's not so much to root for anymore. I mean, you're happy for her, but where do you go after that?
Parks and Recreation, you mentioned. 30 Rock. So talk a little bit more about 30 Rock and the Liz Lemon evolution.
She started kind of at the top, of her profession. Here she is. She's helming, writing a television show that's very successful. So she started off right off the bat being very successful, but devoted to her job. And because she's so successful, that contributed to her not being able to find a romantic partner, for a very long time. And when she did find someone, it ended up being a much younger man who had little to no success himself. But she, I think, had been always looking for somebody who was more like her, a successful person in their own right. And when she finally let down her guards and stopped looking for what she thought she was supposed to look for, the type of person, she found love.
Do you think that the wardrobe of Liz Lemon actually changed the workplace?
Definitely. I think so. She showed that you don't have to wear a power suit, to be powerful and to have the respect of the men that she was managing. I mean, she was in charge of an entire writing crew that was all male.
She had power. Jack respected. He occasionally criticized her, obviously, for what she was wearing at the time. But she embraced it, and she continued to wield the confidence, and more often than not proved right in whatever points she was making or risks she was taking. So I think she came across as enough of an underdog pretty consistently through the entire series that you were always rooting for her and hoping that somebody had her back. And it is a very rich series, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she at the end, even though she found love, you're still rooting for her because it wasn't the kind of relationship anybody that she was close with thought she should be in. Everyone was against it.
Either she was going to rise on to tremendous success, or the plight of women in their 40s in TV is obviously well recounted right now about the limited opportunities and room for growth, unless you have somebody like a Jack Donaghy somewhere in your corner, sort of helping you navigate the entertainment industry. Anyways. All right. So we just have a few more things to wrap up. This is, in fact, one of the smaller themes, which should equate to a shorter podcast episode. But you've mentioned your series, which turn out to be, when you think about it, Jeanine, right, Amy Poehler, and Tina Fey. So, it's rooted in a Gen X sort of mentality, which is born out of perhaps a better understanding that we can all be ourselves and none of us is perfect. And the more you try to project that, the more you perpetuate it. And so they perhaps gave us some permission to let down a little bit and to go with our hearts.
Yeah, they don't fit into the cookie cutter mold, that we think successful women have to be in and have a certain look. Yeah, they're very comfortable in their own skin.
So with that, the book that Jeanine has written is called All the Single Girls. Jeanine, I'm going to ask that you help listeners figure out how to best buy your book, how to most expediently buy All the Single Girls.
As a print or ebook on Amazon.com, or you can get the print book on BarnesandNoble.com.
Excellent. And how does somebody find you
I'm
out
on
there
Twitter
on the internet?
a lot. You can tweet me at RetroTVLover at RetroTVNerd. If you want to send me an email, I'm at retrotvlover@gmail.com. And you can check out my blog spot, retrotvlover.blogspot.
So if, in fact, you do any sort of Googling of retro TV lover in that order, you are most likely going to find a Jeanine Furino place on the internet. Well, this is one of the more unique themes that Jeanine has brought forward through her book, All the Single Girls. And it's been tremendous fun just sort of revisiting some of these really core and recent series. We haven't had to go back to the 50s or 60s to find really strong Feminerd.
Very cool.
So thanks for being on this installment of Advanced TV Herstory, Jeanine.
So before I roll all the credits here, I'd like to share with you some thoughts that we received from a previous episode, one where Jeanine Furino and I spoke about the book All the Single Girls, and we talked about the character of the woman who doesn't know what she wants. It resonated with fellow podcaster Chris Dersh.
Hey, Cynthia. This is Chris Baker Dersh here of the No Extra Words podcast, a huge fan of your show. I'm responding to your episode with your guest where you talked about women in television who have trouble figuring out what they want to be, women who are lost, women who don't fit into some of those other categories that you and your guests were discussing. And I am far from being a millennial. I'm a couple months shy of 40, so I'm a long way from 24. And that was kind of the target audience of that particular character type. But I could relate to the idea of having this piece of paper, this degree, and nothing to show for it. And I feel like I spent a lot of my 20s feeling that way. And I don't think I'm alone on that in my generation either. And my spirit animal in those years was the character, Janelle Maloney's character, Donna Moss on The West Wing. Now, for those of you who know anything at all about The West Wing, you get the backstory of characters as the season unfolds. So you get introduced to Donna early on, and you don't get her backstory until the end of the first season. And when you do get it, you realize Donna ends up in this job. So she plays Bradley Whitford, Josh Lyman's assistant on the show. And she gets this job because she pretends she's already got it. Back in the days when the West Wing staff was a presidential campaign staff, she shows up at campaign headquarters and she starts answering phones and pretending she works there and pretending she's already been hired. And he catches her in that act and calls her out on it and tells her truly that she's doing this to escape from something. She's running away from a bad relationship. And he says to her in that moment, and I have never forgotten this because it rang so true to me. He says to her, this is a presidential campaign. This is not a place for people to find themselves. And her response is, can it be both? Is it going to interfere with my typing? And I felt that way about basically every job I had before I started grad school. And if I'm completely honest, several jobs I had since then. And I've had some weird jobs along the way. Sold fruit at a farmer's market once. I once stuffed breastfeeding pillows. It's not been a straight line, this resume of mine. And again, I don't think I'm alone there. But every job I had, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I've had all of those, was a chance for me to figure out who I wanted to be in the world and who I wanted to be on the planet. It was always more than a job, even if it was a bad job. And Donna Moss, when she comes into this job, she doesn't have the qualifications for it. She doesn't have the degree for it. She's somebody who's basically running away from home, and a presidential campaign seems like a good idea to jump on board. And she stays, and she gets hired as his assistant and moves on with him into the West Wing staff as the series goes on. And about 5 years into the show, she kind of wakes up one morning and realizes she never grew out of this job. She's been somebody's assistant. She's been stuck in this job for a really long time. And you see her sort of have to break out of that mold. The through line, of course, through the whole show is that she's in love with Josh Lyman. And I've heard Janelle Maloney give interviews about this part, and she said that's how she got it. She was not cast as a regular on the show. She was cast as a recurring character, and she got made into a regular because she built that role for herself. And she said when she auditioned, she read the script, and the first thing she said is, well, she's in love with him. And so every acting decision she made from that point onward was in service of that particular motivation. But that story of being in a job that's more than a job, but being stuck in it and being not sure that you want it, that was so much of my life in that era when this show was around. And she became kind of my example of that woman who doesn't know what she wants to be. That's not true. She does know what she wants to be. She doesn't know what she wants to do. And I think those two things are different. You talked about in the episode with your guest about women who don't know what they want to be. But I think it's different than that. I think a lot of women know what they want to be, or at least they know what they don't want to be. They just don't know what they want to do, which is a smaller piece of that. Again, I'm going to be 40 soon, and I'm still not entirely sure I figured out the what I want to do piece. Anyway, loved the episode, loved the show. Just had to give a shout out to one of my favorite TV shows ever. And keep sending me episodes of Advanced TV Herstory. This is one of my favorite podcasts. I always love to hear what you are saying about women in TV and in the world. Take care.
As always, get a hold of us at advancedtvherstory@gmail.com, and that's advancedtvherstory@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at TV Herstory. There is a Facebook page called Advanced TV Herstory. Please go ahead and like us and stay in the loop on all the news that we have going on. If you want to go to the website to see scripts for scripted shows and other news, our website is tvherstory.com.
As always, I'd like to thank Jen Eads of Brassy Broadcasting for all her work as audio technician extraordinaire. And listeners, if you find that this show is something that you find valuable and you want it to continue, then I ask that you go to tvherstory.com, scroll down on the whole homepage to a button that says Become a Patron. And then you will be taken to another page. It's called Patreon. For those of you who do not listen to too many podcasts, it's a place where you can put your $2, your $3 down and say, Cynthia, this is a great show. Keep up the good work. And what that does then is it goes on to pay for all the services and subscriptions that it takes to put this podcast on. One of those free services, however, comes through Free Music Archive, and the music that we use at our intro is Jazzer's Take Me Higher. And lastly, that Leslie Knope clip came from season 2, episode 4, entitled Practice Date.